Today I'm going to show you the chords and song structure to a lesser-known gem of a song from a lesser-known band from the 60s. The song is called A Rose for Emily by the group The Zombies off their excellent 1968 album Odessey and Oracle, which I highly recommend you listen to. I'm going to try to keep this video shorter than my usual 30 to 60 minute affairs. This isn't a terribly long song, A Rose for Emily, so we should be able to get through this in about half the time. I don't want to do a huge intro about the band and the song, but very briefly, the Zombies were a British band from the 60s, largely overshadowed by the Beatles' success. They sounded, in their early days, kind of similar. Pop and the British accent and the haircuts and everything. They had a couple hits in there, She's Not There, Tell Her No, and Time of the Season, which was off Odessey and Oracle. They didn't have a terrible amount of success, but they were a pretty good band, honestly. Some of the characteristics of this band were the angelic voice of the lead singer, Colin Blunstone. He's just got a really, really nice voice. It reminds me almost of like Carl Wilson, or that real soft, angelic. Then the pianist, or who also plays electric piano sometimes, Rod Argent, has this kind of funky, almost jam band kind of vibe, which is pretty cool and is one of the hallmarks of their band. I think some of them I'd read somewhere, I haven't looked into this, maybe you guys could tell me below, were like English choir boys. So on Odessey and Oracle, you start hearing these, bigger, like not quite Beach Boys level of complexity, but like English choir Beach Boys type of thing really come into the forefront on Odessey and Oracle. So check that out. And yeah, they were just a cool band. They had some cool songs. Go check out that record. You will not be disappointed. Listen to it a couple times. If you haven't heard this song, honestly, this lesson is not going to be that useful, so go listen to The Zombies, A Rose for Emily, a couple times. In doing so, it's going to help this lesson make a lot more sense. The song is a haunting, melancholy tune, but it's also very beautiful. It's very sparse. It's got the lead singer and his angelic voice and piano pretty much, and then some background vocals. There's no drums. There's no anything else. The chord structure in this almost reminds me of like a God Only Knows type of thing. So yeah, it's a real pretty sort of elevated ballad with interesting bass notes and chord inversions, and it's just a real nice song. It's got some surprising key changes, and the song is beautiful and melancholy. I'm not going to tear apart the lyrics, but it seems to be a sad woman growing old alone. Men come and visit her, and they have fun, but they never bring her a rose. If you like my lessons, the best way to support me is on Patreon. It really helps me grow this thing a little bit. So go visit my Patreon, High Castle Conservatory, and become one of my students. So the song starts out, no intro, right on verse 1. We're clearly in the key of G because the first two chords are 1, 5, and G. The summer is here at last. It's a pretty clear 1, 5, and G. The summer is here at last. Let me sing just the first verse for you so you get a feel for what the song's supposed to be. Then I'll take you through these surprising key changes. The summer is here at last. The sky is overcast and no one brings a rose for Emily. She watches her flowers grow while lovers come and go to give each other roses from her tree, but not a rose for Emily. So that was verse 1 and verse 2. Yeah, just lonely old piano and voice. Like you're in some kind of blues bar or something like that. The summer is here at last. So we all recognize that 1, 5, and G. It's not a D7, it's just a regular D major, but if it was G to D7, that'd be 1, 5, and G. So we did our 1, 5 in G. Then it goes, if you look at see where I said E7 flat 9 over F? pretty much this is an F diminished 7 chord. But most diminished 7 chords, I really want you guys to understand this, it's an important point, are functioning as some kind of dominant chord. And that's because a diminished 7 chord is mostly a dominant chord. So see this E7 flat 9? That just means diminished. The flat 9 is the F. 4 times out of 5 you hear a diminished chord, it is functioning as some sort of dominant chord. And I can't get into the whole reason why, but if you imagine what a diminished chord does, is it takes the musical universe, which is an octave, and it splits it exactly in 4, right, in minor thirds. And if I drop any one note, I get a dominant chord. If I drop this F sharp to F, I get F7. If I drop this E flat to D, I get D7. If I drop this C to B, I get B7. If I drop the A to G sharp, I get G sharp 7. So a diminished is this point where you're kind of neither here nor there, but it oftentimes relates to a dominant chord. So this E7 flat 9 here, I could have just left well enough alone and called that F diminished 7. I don't even want you playing an E in that. When I say E7 flat 9, it's because I wanted you to see that it's a 5 to 1 in a new key. And a lot of times what a diminished chord does is it makes the musician or the composer think, I don't even know where I am right now. And that's fine to not know where you are, but if it's a clear 5 to 1, like in this case, then let's do it. So like I said, we have 1, 5. The summer is here at last in G. Then we go to the key of A, which is up a whole step, very strange, and we do a 5, 1, 5, 1, but we just make them fancier than normal 5 1s. So this song is not even content to go 2 bars before just suddenly changing keys, making an unexpected key change. Unannounced modulation is what I call that. Is here at last. Now we go to the key of A, and if you notice, what we do is just do 5 1 5 1 2 5 in A. But the bass note has a melody of its own, and that's why it actually sounds interesting. The summer's here at last. Modulate to the key of A and do 5 1. The sky is overcast and no one brings a rose. And now, you see how we do like a 2-5 right there, that B minor to E? That's 2-5 in A, but look what we do. Right in verse 2, we go back to G with an unannounced modulation. So nothing in particular leads us back to G. And songwriters, I want you to remember that. If you try to make a logical connection between all your key changes, it sounds really boring. You have to just go sometimes without there being a normal way to get there. So in this case, we went 2 bars in G, and then we modulate to A and just do 5 1. 5 1. Now 2 5 in A. But we don't resolve to A, we go back to G. She watches the flowers grow while lovers come and go to give each other roses from her tree, but not a rose for Emily. So yeah, verse 1 went 2 bars in G and then a bunch of bars in A. And I can tell you that's not a very common key change, to do 2 bars and then suddenly go up a whole step. And then for the second verse, it goes without announcing itself as a modulation after the B minor over E. Instead of resolving to A, which the ear expects, it goes back to the G. She watches the flowers grow. Now E7 flat 9 over F, which is just F diminished 7. But I wanted you to see that it was functioning as a 5. So that's why I didn't write F diminished 7. You could have written F diminished 7. That would not be wrong there. Verse 2. Watches the flowers grow. E7 flat 9. While lovers 1 over its 5. And go to each other roses from. Nice bass notes. Retreat. but not a rose for Emily. Emily, can't you see? So that's the chorus. So that was kind of cool. At the verse 2, they added 2 bars onto the form. I always say that if you have all 4-bar phrases, your song is kind of boring. You have to eventually throw in a 2-bar phrase or a 1-bar phrase or a 3-bar phrase or a 5-bar phrase. But even adding a 2-bar phrase, so you make it sort of like a 6 instead of a 4, gives some kind of a breakup to the ear of the song form. And that's what they do here on verse 2. Extra 2 bars right here before the chorus, and all the chorus does, I believe, is modulate up a half step. Emily. So great device right there. If you ever feel like I just need some kind of excitement, Brian Wilson did it quite frequently. Listen to When I Grow Up to Be a Man. You can just suddenly modulate up a half step anytime you want. And it's kind of a cheap move in certain circumstances, but if you lead the ear just the right way, it can have a really nice effect. You wouldn't want to abuse it, I guess I would want to say, where you're constantly, modulating up a half step to get it. It's a shocking effect, honestly. So the end of that verse, but end of verse 2, not a rose for the extra 2 bars, Emily. Suddenly up a half step and going 1 to 5 in B flat. Emily, can't you see? Then suddenly we have what should be called a C sharp diminished 7. Remember, we talked about this earlier, but I want to show you what dominant it is functioning as, if it is functioning as some dominant. It is possible to do a diminished chord that doesn't bear much relation to an obvious dominant, but in this case it goes 5 to 1, 5 to 1. Where have we seen this pattern before? Oh yeah, the verse went 1 to 5 and then modulated keys and went 5 1. So in the chorus, what they do is go 1 5 again in a different key, and then 5 1. See, that's just that A7 flat 9 is a C sharp diminished 7. I don't even want an A in there. See why I said over C sharp? I don't want an A in there. I just want you to see that it's functioning as an A7 chord. And so we modulate to the key of D. So the chorus, we suddenly went up a half step to B flat, 1 5. Emily, can't you see 5? Now the key of D, we go 5. Nothing you can want. Now 5 again in D. There's nothing. 1 with F sharp in the bass, but 5. Now you see why we're here, because you turn that dominant, and that's 5 of our original key, right? Which was G. So verse 1 was in. So they ended up in the key of D, and that's a thing you can always do. So our home key was G, right? The first key we had in the song. So therefore its D is going to be D7. So you can see what that chorus did was they ended up in the key of D and then simply turned it dominant, and it becomes the 5 of the first chord. Does that make sense? So yeah, interesting modulation sets here. So for one more time, we have verse 1, which is 1 5 in G. 5 of 1 in G. Let's take a second just to appreciate that bass line. D. This song would not be half of what it is without that bass line. We think we're resolving to A, but we're resolving to G for verse 2. And then we modulate to A suddenly and do a series of 5 1s in A. 5 1 over its major third, 2 5. Finally we resolve to A before we go to this chorus, and then we suddenly take it up a half step, B flat 1 5. Then we suddenly modulate to D, just like the verse did. 5 1 in D, another 5 1 in D, 5. And now we're back to D and just turn it dominant, and that becomes the dominant, the 5 of G. Sorry, got kind of lost in that chord change right there. One cool thing you can do, I'm going to do whole videos about that, but is get off of a metronome. It's okay to have a metronome where you need it, but you need to have some parts of your songs that breathe. And at the end of this chorus, they do just that. It's just voice and piano, so it's like, so it would be like, that's the chorus, 5-1 and D. Here it comes. You just do a little slowdown, a little ritardando, and it adds so much to it. And if you're working in a DAW like I do, I have to actually program the changes I want. And it's a lot easier for me to clap what I want than it is for me to like take MIDI beats and move them around. So a lot of times what I'll do is clap the tempo change that I'm hearing, and then I'll pull the beats of the master click track, around that. But that's going to be a whole different video. So after this chorus, we get that D back to D7, and all it really does is go to another verse, which is just like the first one. So there's pretty much exactly the same thing, except for one little surprising change, and I want you to take a note of that, of how do you make one little surprising change to a song. That verse 4, which is the same as before, except it's going to add 1 or 2 bars here by repeating something, which is an interesting device. So this is verse 4. And as the years go by, she will grow old and die. The roses in the garden fade away. Go back up to the last chord. Not one left for her grave. Actually, we have a normal amount of bars because of those extra bars. So we added 2 bars. Remember, we had an odd bar of 6 that I was praising. They've taken that out, this 4th verse, and that's pretty cool because all they did was... I'll show you here. E7 flat 9 over D. Back up to the last chord. And back down. That's it. So the effect that has on the melody, she will grow old and die. The roses in the garden fade away. Not one left for her grave. Not a rose for Emily. Now chorus 2, up a half step suddenly. Emily, can't you see? There's nothing you can do. Immediately modulated to D there, and they're doing 5 1s. There's loving everywhere but none for you. A little ritardando. Now we're going to go back to verse 3. Her roses are fading now. She keeps her pride. Somehow that's all she has, protecting her from pain. And as the years go by, verse 4 again, she will grow old and die. The roses in her garden fade away. Repeat it. Not one left for her grave. Not a rose. Now go to end. For Emily. So that's the ending there. Yeah, the song form is not super complex, but like I said, that just adding those 2 extra bars in verse 4 only, because it was not in verse 1 and it was not in verse 2. So it was not in verse 3, it was in verse 4, and then when it took that repeat, it was in verse 4 again. So yeah, some strange key changes. 2 bars of G, then we go up to A for a little while, and then verse 2 we go back to G. We go up to A for a little while, and finally we suddenly go up a half step for the chorus. And then then we go to the key of D. So for the chorus, we went from A up to B flat, and then to D, which is actually the 5 of our original key, which was G. And then it seems like it's all just going to repeat it. So it does verse 3, which is the same, and then verse 4 adds those extra 2 bars, which is very unexpected. Chorus 2 is exactly the same, where it goes up a half step unexpectedly and ends up back, taking the repeat to verse 3. And once again, verse 4 does those 2 extra bars, at which point it goes to the end. Let's talk through the song one more time. We have 1-5 in G. 1-5 in G. Now 5-1 in A. Now 2-5 in A, but we don't resolve to A. We go back to G. Years go by. 5-1 in A. 1, 5, 1, 2, 5. Now finally resolve to A and do an extra 2 bars. Suddenly up a half step, B flat. 1-5. Now 5-1 in D. 5-1, 5-1. That's why I turn those diminished chords into dominant chords if they're applicable. Little retardando there, going back to verse 3. Her roses are fading now. She keeps her pride somehow, that's all she has protected her from pain. 2-5 in A, but don't resolve to A. 1-5 in G, and as the years go by, 5-1 in A, she will grow old and die in 5 and then 1. Extra bar, go back up. Now go to the end this time. Thanks a lot for watching this video and taking an interest in my channel. Please help me reach a larger audience by hitting subscribe below and ringing the notification bell. Check out my video playlist page to find the categories that most interest you. Leave me a super thanks here on YouTube, and even better, come join my Patreon. Please consider buying music for my original projects I.S.S. and High Castle Teleorchestra. Also, don't forget to sign up for my email list on the front page of timsmolens.com. You can find information about all of those things in the description below. Thanks again.